Okay, so sounds like my microphone is on. I'm here to talk a very scary subject to most people, including myself. Specifically the subject of money and talking to potential employers or even your current employer about salary or benefits or whatnot, and bringing those conversations up and hopefully making a positive change for yourself they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. This is very, very much a scary topic. It's something that I find personally very scary, even though that I've been giving advice for over 10 years, helping other women in tech and people in tech in general to talk money and negotiate their salaries. It's still to this day something I struggle with. So I just want to say up front that I understand that this is a very tough subject. This presentation has a lot of information that's aimed specifically at women because this is a problem that exists very strongly for women in tech. That said, the tactics that I go over in this presentation relate to everybody. So whether you're a man or anything else. But I will be doing specifically some pieces of advice that are aimed specifically for women in tech. So if you don't feel like you're a part of that group, I hope you're not offended. You can always use it to help others and your friends and people you know. My name is Tracy Osborn. Je m'appelle Tracy, I think. I do not speak French. Désolé. Je parle petit peu, I think. You can find me on the internet as Tracy Makes. I would also be taking these slides and putting them onto Speaker Deck, and I will be sharing them on my Twitter immediately. So if you want to get the resources immediately after this talk, it will be on my Twitter, say 15 or so minutes afterwards. You might know me from my books that I've written. I have a couple books teaching how to write, how to do web app development using Django, and then I have a book teaching web design. And I've been largely working for myself for the last 10 years, which is why it's been really easy for me to go out and mentor other people in tech. And I haven't had personally a lot of these conversations in a long time because I've been working for myself. But the funny thing is that I'm currently in the process of negotiating a job offer right now. And probably after this presentation, I told myself I had to wait. I will probably be accepting a job offer by tonight. So this has been this last week, negotiating this job. And setting up this presentation has been very helpful for me. So like I said, I've been working for myself for about 10 or so years. And I want to skip back to something that happened about 12 or so years for me. And it was literally the scariest and most transformative moment in my career. So a little bit of story time. My first job out of university was working as a front-end developer for a startup. And when I first interviewed with them, it was literally a bunch of dudes in a garage down the street from my university. And I was going to be the first woman hire working with them. And it was so informal. It was just going to be a bunch of friends trying to get rich together in this actual garage. I ended up working with them for 4.5 years. And in that time, we moved from the garage. This is in California. We moved from the garage in Central California to the San Francisco Bay Area into a full office. And the entire time I was there, it was very small, less than 15 people. And the whole time, it was always, oh, we're a startup. We're all working here together. We're all friends. The bosses, I went out for drinks with them all the time. We're all in together. And every year at my yearly review, my bosses would sit down with me and they would say, you're doing a fantastic job. We have a maximum raise of every year of 10%, and you've received that 10%. And so every year, I told myself, cool, I am kicking butt. I got this job down pat. I'm doing super, super well. I'm doing everything right. And then came along my now husband. I met a guy on online dating, and the funny thing is about outside influences, it's really nice to have an outside influence to come along and sometimes tell you that the assumptions that you made were incorrect. And he's here, not in this room, but he's here. And so I'm kind of glad he's not in this room right now, so he doesn't get to hear the story about what he did. Because we went on like 1 or 2 dates. It was very early on in our dates and sitting down for coffee, and somehow, and this is very him, somehow he wiggled out of me how much my salary was. He loves to talk to people about how much they're making. And I told him my salary, being all proud of myself. I'm like, oh, and I think at the time it was $53,000. And we're in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he's like, you are being underpaid. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I have been, I had every excuse. It's a small startup. We're growing slowly, we have to save our money, we don't have funding. I got that 10% raise year to year, there's nothing for me to go. And he's like, those excuses are incorrect. And so then our dating life transformed into me meeting with him for coffee. And he would walk with me, we'd walk up and down the suburbs, and he would just take every one of my excuses and squash them. And he eventually convinced me that I needed to ask for a raise. And not just a raise, but a significant raise. He wanted me to ask for a raise to go from, and he convinced me that this was correct, to go from $53,000 to $90,000, which is more correct for the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a gigantic jump. And somehow, again, this is like the first 6 months of me dating this guy. He's now my husband. So the day of my raise, my salary review came with my bosses, and I sat down with them. And of course, my bosses said to me, you've done such a great job, you've done so well, we're going to give you that 10% raise, raising you to, I think it was like $63,000. Congratulations, you can go. And I heart thumping so fast, like feeling like I'm about to die. I said, I thank you for this offer, and thank you for giving me, that amount of a raise. But I looked at the current salary requirements for this area, and I think I should be being paid $85,000. Now, note that wasn't 90. And the funny thing is, I went back to my husband, and I was like, oh, at last moment, I cut myself down. He's like, I knew you would. Which is why I told you to do 90. Oh my God. So, of course, my bosses, they go white, and they go very quiet, and that scares me so much. And they're like, we need to talk about this. You can leave the room. We'll call you back in. And I go back to my desk, and I am just like rocking myself, because I'm like, they're going to fire me, or they're going to reprimand me, or they're going to take away that original raise, or I have completely rocked the boat at this company. And it feels like it's something that is irreversible. But 30 minutes later, or so, they called me back into the office, and they said, we've talked about your request. And we can't do 85, but we can do 82. Which, if you do the math, is a 55% raise, which is amazing. And I walked out of that room completely gobsmacked. And very proud of myself. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that worked. The bosses weren't mad. I just went on to my day. And then I started thinking. And then I got a little mad because they knew. They knew I was being underpaid. They knew it. And there was no reason to pay me more until I asked for it. Because this 10% raise thing was something they just implemented, and that was just their own little internal rule, and that was the way that they kept their employees from asking more. And again, these are my friends. We're at a very small company. This is the moment. This is the very most important moment in my career. That taught me the importance of I have to know what I am worth at all times. And I have to know how to ask for it. I can't rely on a company to just give me what they think is fair, because it's in the company's interest to pay me as little as possible. So like my husband to me, being able to sit down with me and tell me very clearly that I needed to make a change. Hopefully for you, this is something that will help you make a change if you find yourself in this position. So, first step is, how do you know what you're worth? How do you know what you should be paid? Because this is something that is kind of more qualitative than quantitative, but there are resources out there. The first one is to build a support network, and that's this lovely guy, what he did for me. But even if you don't have, a significant other who's very obnoxious and loud about money to yell at you until you make a change, there's a lot of other resources out there that I find are very welcoming and very willing to talk about money. There's 2 email lists that I am on, and there's lots of others out there, but this is DevChicks and Sisters. And all the time there's people asking questions about whether they should be paid or get some feedback on an offer or get some support. There's also Slack groups. There's the Women in Technology Slack group, which I believe is open for all, and even conferences. I'm not sure if forgot to check if this conference has a Slack, but even conferences or other Slack groups, these are places where you can, even anonymously say, here's where I am in my career, here's the company where I am at, can you give me some feedback? And I really like to have these kind of questions instead of just, I'll talk pay scale websites in a second, but it's really nice being able to say, here's where I am personally and have like a human conversation with another person. Okay, so these questions come up all the time. This is one I found where it's just like, hey, I got this offer. Should I negotiate in the salary? I'm not sure if I should. And it's really nice being able to put that out there and get feedback. Now, of course, there's salary aggregators out there like salary.com, glassdoor.com, payscale.com, where you can review salaries for your current position or your current company or your current location where you are in the world. So those are kind of the big ones. Another one I really like is levels.fyi, and that's specifically for people in tech. And you can see that you can search by the big companies, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, et cetera, and for a software engineer, and I think they have product designer and some other levels in there. And you can see exactly for those companies how the pay changes per position. So like at Google, you can see if you're level 3 software engineer, level 4 software engineer, et cetera. So it's really useful if you work in tech to have these very specific tech salaries to compare to. Another thing I need to bring back is TalkPay, the hashtag TalkPay. So this happened on Twitter a few years ago and encouraged people to just in a tweet, say, this is where I am in my career, and this is my salary, and whatnot. And it was so useful to see other humans and their salaries and making it more commonplace to talk about what we're being paid in tech. So you can search the archives by searching for this hashtag on Twitter, and I think there's other resources on the internet for this hashtag. And it's not as popular now, but hopefully it'll come back and we can start talking pay again. And you can talk to your coworkers about salary. There's a lot of companies out there, my old one included, which put in the handbook that you are not allowed to talk to your coworkers about salary, which is totally unenforceable and is only serving the company's interest. So, there's a lot of sometimes it might be scary to talk to your coworkers. You don't want to cause issues or cause any kind of friction in between you and your fellow coworkers. But if you're in a position to ask your coworkers, hey, this is what I'm being paid. You're the same level as me. What are you being paid? You could find out that you're being paid a lot less. And it's not like the company can sue you or anything like that. This is something that you can do. So don't listen to those handbooks. And don't wait until you're unhappy to become informed. Because again, at that startup, I was happy. I thought I was doing everything correct. I thought that I was being paid the max I could be paid for my position. And it turns out that all I needed to do to get myself into an average salary for that position was to simply ask for it. So I'm really glad, again, I had that external force to help me to make that decision to go out and be like, I am indeed being underpaid, because otherwise I was just going to my job and doing my best work and going back home and not really thinking about how much money I could be making. All right, so now you've determined that you want to change, whether that's a change at your current company, whether that's a change in, when you're looking for jobs and you're starting to negotiate with new companies. What should you do? And I have to do this little GIF because it's so adorable. All you need to do is get real poofy and bring your sock, and you're hired. All right, back to seriousness. The first step is to change how you think, and this is really hard, and it's not something that's going to be ever completely perfect. Again, for me, it's still not completely perfect, and this last week of negotiating this job offer has been sending me into a complete tizzy because I'm like, always negotiate, and my brain is telling me, but I don't want to ruin this. So change how you think, and just like get it in your head, things to make it easier for you to negotiate. In terms of thoughts, society has taught women to shy away from bold behavior. This is one of the things that makes it hard to negotiate because that is inherently bold and asking for something and being upfront and in charge. And society has taught us to squash those feelings. Now, we're taught to fear hurting the relationships that we've made, whether it's with our potential manager or the recruiter or the company that we want to work with or our current manager or whatnot. We fear that by asking these hard questions, we might hurt that relationship, maybe irreparably. And we tend to focus less on what we can offer. Rather, we focus on what the company can offer us, which makes it scary to ask for a change because we're thinking about all the things we may lose in that company, but we're not thinking about how much that company can lose by not having us. And we tend to take negotiations personally. It's really hard when you're sitting up there asking those hard questions and you can see that person with a frown. That's something that they didn't anticipate or that's something they didn't initially want to offer. And it kind of like hurts your chest a little bit because you're like, oh no, you take it personally. And that's something that's been instilled into us by society. So just being aware of these things, I think, is step one. I also like to read a lot of books on this topic. I think that reading advice on this subject helps instill into my brain, a percentage at a time. So sometimes I might read a book and I'm 5% more bold in my negotiating, and then I read another book and then it gets to 10%. So it's not like a 0 to 100 immediately. It's a learning process. So I try to keep myself up to date by reading books on this subject. This one's a little controversial. I know there's a lot of people who don't like lean in, but specifically for negotiation, this really helped change my view on how I needed to be in charge and ask for the things I needed to ask for. And here it says that we internalize the negative messages we get through our lives, those ones I mentioned earlier. And the lean in really is saying here are these negative messages and here's the things that you can do to counteract it. There's a lot of things we need to do externally and change the culture, but there's a lot of stuff we can do personally to change, at least for the short term. So I really like lean in. Another one that really helped me out was Amanda Palmer's Art of Asking. And it's a beautiful, wonderful, lovely book. And just talking about when you need to ask for something, and not just for money, just in general. There's things like the fear of rejection, the fear of looking needy, the fear of looking weak. And it's a wonderful book. I highly recommend reading it. And it helped change me to be a more confident person. Another thing that helped me day to day to help try to change my mindset, I do a lot of little things. Just practice, with the Art of Asking, Amanda Palmer. One of the things is just practice asking. Just asking for what I want. And this can be for little things. For example, whenever I fly, this has gotten a little harder in the last couple of years, but for the last 10 years, I've been having a tactic of, say I'm flying from one city to another, and the cheaper fare is at some really awful late in the day slot. And I'm in that city, and I go to the airport early, and I'd just love to go home a little bit earlier, but that earlier flight was too expensive, so I chose the later flight. But at the airport, I'll go, this doesn't work with checked bags, but I'll go to the other counter and be like, hey, I'm on this later flight. I don't have any checked bags. Is there any room in this earlier flight for me? And it's probably worked about 80% of the time, which is really cool. And it's not something that you would realize you could do. But for the flight, they have space on their flight. And this usually doesn't check, trigger or change flight fee either. It's just asking. And what's the worst you can say? The worst I can say is no. And specifically for asking, it's also other than asking, it's also when people ask things of you, is to practice saying no. And I think this helps with confidence. And this is really good to do in like lots of little things, because that's something with society. We're kind of, we want to be friendly and approachable and always say yes or maybe or anything. And it's really hard for people and women to just say no. So practice this in your life. Practice when people ask you to go out for something you don't want, and you really want to say yes just so you can appear to be friendly and welcoming and opening, just try saying no. And little things like just saying no to things that you realize you're saying yes to, and protecting yourself is going to affect how well you can negotiate in like these money situations. And negotiate the little things. If there's a place, it's funny traveling to Mexico because I am terrible at negotiating when, as you're expected at these little kiosks where someone's like, here, I'll give you this purse for 500 pesos. And I'm like, ugh, and I run away. And my husband's like, if you just ask for 100, they'd probably give it to you. And I'm like, So like practicing, when you're traveling, you're in a place where it's expected to negotiate when you trade. That's a really great place to practice just going back and forth and talking about money, and like squashing that like rising panic that I definitely get whenever I have to be like, no, I don't want that price. Give me another price. One of the things I did while coming in, this is not necessarily negotiating, I guess it's more like asking. But my current hotel, I had gotten a room with one bed, and even the process of saying, like, going up to them and be like, can I have 2 beds instead? And they're like, oh, it'll be an extra charge. But I thought they would just say no originally, and I was just like really happy that I took the effort to ask for a different room. I've done this in the past for hotels. We're asking for a higher floor room. We're asking for a better room. And again, these are the kind of things where it's just the worst they can say is no. And by practicing asking or requesting these things or negotiating, these little things are going to make negotiating salaries and whatnot easier in the future. Now, this one's hard because it takes time. But if you are at a current company and you're thinking that you want to make a change, you want to ask your employers for another salary, if you have the time and you have the phrase is spoons. I'm not sure if I can use that here. I don't know if people know the spoon theory. If you don't have enough mental energy for this, it's kind of hard to do. But if you do, a great way to increase your confidence is have an offer at another company before you go to your first company, or at least know what you're worth from the other company. So if you have the time, go out to some other companies and go through the interview process, and maybe you'll get an offer. Maybe you're not sure if you want to leave your current company, but this could be the thing that tells you, hey, this is where I actually am in my career. This is what I could get. And so maybe you're happy with the company, but you have this very solid, concrete idea about what you're worth, and you can go back to your company you're happy with and say, there is this offer, and this is really great, but I would love to stay here, so I want to see if you can match it. So this is something that you could do to help boost your confidence. Now I want to mention this again, because I mentioned this a few times already. The thing that has helped me most, absolutely, for any of these things, is to imagine what the worst case scenario could be and try to really think through it and try to think logically about it. Look at it in terms of percentages when it comes to, say, like when I was talking to my bosses and asking for that gigantic raise. Maybe there's like a 25% chance that they'll say yes. It's 75% chance of them saying something other than yes, but there is a 25% chance that they'll just say yes. But there's a larger percentage, there's a much higher chance of them saying, negotiating with me, wanting to meet somewhere in the middle or something like that. Again, these numbers aren't based in reality. It's just kind of like how I look at that process and trying to think logically what could happen. So I'm kind of making these numbers up. But when I think about this, that's 75% chance of them working with me in some positive way. But of course, there's the chance that I just say no. I just say no. And that would be sad, but I look at that percentage chance and I'm like, okay, that's pretty low chance. But there's that really, really scary, There's a really scary percentage, that chance that when I ask for a salary increase, or if I go to the company that I want to work at and I say, thank you, I want this amount of money. And they might be saying, you know what? You're not worth it. We're rescinding that job offer, or we're firing you. There is a chance of that happening with these kind of things. I hope it doesn't happen, but there is a chance, and that's a really, really scary small percentage that could prevent you from making these changes. And the thing that reassures me when I think about the small chance of something terrible like this happening is I tell myself, do I really want to work with a company who has this attitude? Maybe if a company comes back with me and they say, hey, that was insulting, we don't want to deal with that, we don't want to work with you, maybe that's a good thing because that means you're not working with them. So that made me feel a lot better when I thought about the potential terrible consequences of something like me asking happening, to spin that in a positive way, spin that in a way that I'm saying, I'm protecting myself. So thinking about what's the worst case, for every one of these situations about asking or negotiating or whatnot, thinking about what's the worst case and trying to think about that logically, think through what the potential consequences are, how I'll react to those consequences, or what are the potential positives, and really work through that situation has helped me immensely to work up over this fear of asking or negotiation. And here's the thing with negotiation, is that you might be afraid that it's going to take your potential employer or your current employer by surprise, and it shouldn't. It should be expected. Even if a company comes to you and says, here's our offer, and you like the company, you like the process of interviewing them, and you want to take that offer, it is expected by them for you to ask for more. So don't give up that chance. A study done by Linda Babcock revealed that only 7% of women negotiated their first salaries, while 57% of men did. Of the people who negotiated, they were able to increase their salary by over 7%, and that's the starting salary. The thing is, this can have large effects in your career. Because if you get a $100,000 salary and your coworker negotiates up to $107,000 salary, that means that even assuming you're treated identically with raises and promotions, you're going to have to work 8 years longer in the end to be as wealthy as them in retirement. So these initial offers are a really, really important place for you to negotiate up, to work over that fear and ask for more. Because again, what's the worst they can say? They can say no, or they're probably more likely to say yes. And if they take the offer away, you didn't want to work with them anyways. All right, some negotiation/asking tips. Some general ones. So if you're negotiating general salary, try not to give your number yourself. This is one of those typical negotiation tactics where the first person who says a number, then everything is anchored towards that number. And it's great if you can get your potential employer to offer a number first, because it could be way higher than the one that you're initially going to give. And it's probably going to be higher because I, and probably a lot of other people do, tend to undercut ourselves, like I did with that 90 versus 85 thing. If recruiters insist on a number, you can say things like this. Say, I'm open based on the position overall compensation package. So you're like, hey, tell us your previous salary. And you're like, you just come back with that. Or you can say, hey, if this is the beginning of the process and a recruiter wants to know what your salary requirements are, you can say, I'd love to know more about the responsibilities and the challenges of this job prior to discussing salary. Try to punt those conversations. If you're forced to give a number, which does happen, base your number off of research and data, not on your previous salary. Make sure you do that research I mentioned. Make sure you see where you are in that process and talk to your peers and find a good number to give them that's not based on what you've done before. We can base it on what is expected for your position. If you give a specific number, one of the little hints I found on the internet is to give a specific number rather than one that says that's rounded. I didn't do this in the past. I said 85,000, but it's shown that if you say something very specific, like 64,750 is my salary requirement, it makes it look like you're basing that number off of data rather than just a guess. The employer will assume you've done more extensive research into your market value to reach that specific number. So there's a fun little random tip. When you're talking money, this is another thing I struggle with, try to keep your request brief. Do not undercut yourself. Do not babble. Say your request and stop, wait, listen for what they're going to say. There's a tendency for people to say, okay, to the employers, I think I am worth $85,000, and that's because of this, and this thing I did, and there's this other project, and I talked to other people, blah, 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 and they keep going on. So just X that out. Don't say that. Just say, I am worth this based on what I've researched, and then stop back and wait. Because the more you talk, the easier it is for you to kind of slip in things that might undercut what you're saying or make yourself look more nervous than you should be, which I'm, again, totally nervous, but talking a lot is one of those like giveaways. And breathe, take a breath. You know, when my employers, they said, you got your 10% salary increase. You know, there had to be that really moment in the beginning where I was like, okay, time to do the scary thing. But it helped. This doesn't just relate to salary or money. You can negotiate benefits, paid time off as well. All of these things are negotiable. So maybe the salary is set. So you say, hey, I think I should get this salary. And you're like, no, we can't do that. We have to stick with this other salary. Maybe pivot and say, okay, great. You have 2 weeks off. Can I do 3? Or maybe you have a conference you really want to go to. Maybe negotiate that into your offer. So don't just end at money. Look at the benefits that are offered and know that those are all negotiable. And when you get an offer, don't feel obligated to respond immediately. You know, for every, my original job way back in the day, the one at the garage, they told me I had to respond, I think, in 2 days. And so then, you know, as a new person right out of university, I was so pressured and nervous, and I didn't have enough time to talk to other companies and get other offers, and I wasn't sure if that offer was going to go away. So I responded very fast, and I just took their initial offer, which is one of the reasons why my salary was so low. You know, a job that I took a few years ago, I knew better, and the manager came to me asking me to get back to her, I think, within a more reasonable amount of time, which I think was 2 weeks. But I was in the process of talking to other companies, and I said, hey, I'm in this process. I might not know about this process for 3 or more weeks. Is there any way that I can delay this? And she said that they wanted me. They wanted me to work with them, and they're willing to wait as long as possible within reason. And I ended up getting back to them, I think, after a month and a half. This is one of those things where you can ask. You can ask for an extension. You can ask for more time. When an employer comes to you and says, get back to me within a couple of days, that's more likely a negotiation tactic on their end to get you to accept an offer that's probably too low. That said, a timely response can be a negotiation tactic. Maybe there's something that you want out of this position. Maybe you want a higher salary, and you can say, hey, the only thing preventing me from responding in a timely manner is because I feel your salary is a little bit too low. So you can say, hey, to the employer who wants you to join as fast as possible or so they can move on to other people, you can say, I'll respond to you faster if I get this thing which I want. So that's something you can keep in your back pocket. Negotiation, asking, talking money, taking care of yourself first does not mean that you're a mean person, does not mean that you're selfish. It simply means that you're asking for something better. You're just taking the time to watch out for yourself. So if you're scared of talking to these companies or scared of doing these negotiation things, this is totally, absolutely normal. But try to take that little piece of your mind that might be yelling at you and saying you shouldn't do this, and just put it to the side and tell yourself that you're protecting yourself. So, again, for me, I struggle with this still to this day. It's so much easier to give advice than to take it. I totally understand that. And one of the ways that I constantly keep myself up to date and keep myself confident and remind myself that these are things I need to take care of personally is to constantly read resources. So again, in addition to those Slack groups that I'm a part of and those women in tech mailing lists and talking to my friends and family about money, there's a few other resources here that I'd like to go over. The Muse is a really cool website. I believe it's based mostly for women, and it has so much talk about money and so much talk about negotiation and salaries and all that. And I will say that I've stolen so much information from these tips they have. It is such a great website and resource. So I check out the Muse and see, kind of things they're talking about, and I think it's really helpful. There's also a website called She Negotiates, and if you're in a position to hire a coach, could be useful for you. It might be useful for you to hire someone specifically there to kind of walk you through this process and help you out and coach you through negotiation. Things like that exist, and this is one I found, which is She Negotiates. But if you don't have the resources to hire a coach, I certainly don't. It also has a lot of resources on this website around discussions about money and salary and negotiation. So they have a blog and tips and tools and strategies, scripts, and all that jazz talking about this subject. And they link out to other resources, which could be a really great, if you're deep diving into negotiation resources. This is a great place to start because there is lots of resources like books, and then there's worksheets and all these kind of things kind of help you think about money and get that in your brain. In general, I think we need to talk more about money, especially for women in tech. And I think there's been a lot of good progress made on this subject, but it always helps to have more progress and more eyes and more people thinking about it, and more women in general saying, I'm going to look out for my friend and talk to them about money and make sure that they're in a good place. So it's not just for yourself, but work together to change the culture, and work together to make sure that we're making progress on getting women more used to negotiation and talking money and making these strides that we need to do in order to get on equal pay with men. So we need to make this commonplace. We need to continue to talk money. We need to continue to talk about our salary and the struggles we have with negotiation. I find that really helpful. For me to tell that story from myself 12 or so years ago, it's super helpful because it reminds me how far I've come. And it's great to talk to your friends about, this is a negotiation that really well, and this is this disaster that happened. And just, share these stories because you're not alone. Sometimes it can feel very lonely. Maybe you're the only person who gets scared doing salary negotiation when you're actually not. And this is a great place to mentor other people and women, not just women, but people in general. Again, be that person that goes to someone else, like my husband did, very obnoxious. I don't recommend talking to people over dates over money. That's a very dangerous tactic. It worked out well for my husband, but it's a very dangerous tactic. But this is a great place to mentor and talk to other people and be those advocates for change. So it's scary to talk about money, but it's something we should do. This is something that's going to directly affect our careers and where we are in our life. And it's something that's very, very important that a lot of people miss, including myself and oftentimes. Be informed and know what you're worth at all times. Know, even if you're happy with your position, maybe you are at a startup that can't pay more, but just be aware of that, hey, I could be making 20% more at, another company, and just have that in your brain, and that could help propel you to make a change when you need to make a change. There's no harm in asking. There's no harm in asking at all for little things, for big things. Maybe, ask for something small at a coffee shop. Don't be evil. Don't ask for something free or anything like that. But ask for something small. Use those opportunities. And by asking for small things, will make it easier to ask for big things. And be supportive of others. Be that mentor. Be that person there to help someone out. Be that person to hold the hands. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I think I should have plenty of time for questions.
Have any questions?
It's a hard subject.
I have a question. I work in human resources for one of our sponsors, SAP, and of course this subject is very dear to me. I encourage women to always negotiate and communicate what they want, period. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, do you see a difference in the way men negotiate and women negotiate, and do you have any examples?
Can you repeat that last part?
Do you see a difference the way men negotiate and women negotiate, and do you have any examples?
So I'm going to use a very personal example, again, is my husband and myself, because I use him as my rubric. Do I see a difference between men and women in examples? So I'm going to use ourselves. Andre, my husband, is he likes to talk money. He's very direct, and he's very good. He's sold startups, and he's negotiated very high offers for companies, and he has no problem. This is an anecdote. Has no problem when a company says, "Hey, we want to offer you so and so," and he's like, "Well, give me so and so times X." There's like no fear, no nothing, whatnot for him. Not saying all men are like that, but from what I've read and the research shows that men in general don't have that fear, has much of a fear response in responding with that, thank you for that offer, but give me something, 2x more. Andre comes to me all the time, very proud of himself. He's like, aha, they gave me this offer and I just asked for double. And I know, even though I hear him and he was successful, even though I hear these stories, it's still too scary for me in a lot of things to ask for something that big. And so I think that the difference between men and women negotiating in the studies show is that fear response and that the things that society has instilled in our brains and that being scared about asking is perhaps less so for men than for women, which is one of the reasons why education and talking about these things is so important. I hope that answers.
Hi. So I actually had a negotiation thing with my previous employer. So I asked for a title change and also a raise. They said, okay, we can do that. But first, take on a couple more projects. I said, okay, I can do that. So I did it, and I asked again. And then when I asked again, he says, okay, Chelsea, we're still thinking about it, but wait a little bit longer.
Yes.
And this year thing kept on going on. And then eventually I just got fed up with it, and I just left the company.
Yep.
I'm wondering how you would squash these situations where it's they keep asking more from you.
That is a really, really good question. And the situation of an employer, when you say, I want this, and the employer says, do this first, and then you do the thing, and then the employer doesn't follow up on their promise. That's something that happens so often, and it's so easy for employers to just punt your questions away and then get you to do more responsibilities in the meanwhile, which is the frustrating part. I think what you did when you said you finally eventually left the company, I think that was a good response because it showed to you that the company wasn't serious about your asks, and it wasn't serious about you as an employee. They weren't respecting you as an employee, especially because the manager didn't acknowledge that they already made you this promise. So that is an unfortunate answer, is that sometimes companies will pull this, and it could be the thing that says, hey, maybe I don't want to work here anymore because they are not on my side. But what's something you could do is, when you say, hey, company, I want to make this change. I would like a raise and a new title. And they say, take on these more responsibilities. Try to, get a date. Get something in written. Say, okay, cool. Can we get that in writing? That, if I perform so and so by so and so date, I will be getting this change. And they might push back on that. And it could be easier for you to say, I need to get it in writing, so I remember to follow up. Try to tell them you're not just trying to be like an evil employee. This is something that's useful to you as an employee. You need to know when to follow up. You need to check in. You need to have a timeline in order to finish those projects. So by forcing them to a timeline and get this stuff in writing, I think it'll make it easier in the future to be like, no, really, you promised, and here's what we agreed upon. And I think that would be a good way in the future maybe to hold them to their promises that might be broken.
Hi. I totally agree with so much, or if everything what you're saying, absolutely. And I've actually been thinking about it for a while, and I've been that person who's like, so how much are you making?
Yeah.
But the thing is, for me, it kind of backfired at one point. And so I guess my question is related to kind of I guess I believe you in theory, and I think it's good. But then at the same time, I kind of am worried that like there is harm in asking sometimes, and even if it's just in your own head, because like for
Would
me,
you
I
be
used
open
to.
to explaining why it backfired? It's okay to say
'cause-
no.
Yeah, so it was at a previous company that I really enjoyed, like most of the job. I enjoyed the people I worked with, everything like that. And it was a small startup that grew, similar probably situation, and where I was like friends. I also went to school with several of the people, so like was really good friends with particularly people kind of at my level.
Right there with you.
And yeah, and we came in around the similar time, so I knew that we had like similar offer, that we had the exact same offer when we got there, but then kind of checking in and being like, oh, like how much are you getting paid? Like, and just be like, oh, do you think about asking for a raise? Like, same kind of thing as like, we're a startup, like we can't do raises or whatever. And then somebody came in who was hired as like a senior version of my role, which was also because it was a startup, like didn't actually mean anything. Like the role day to day was the exact same, and I was actually trained. Like, I was training that person for like 6 months, and so it's like, okay, so like, what are you making? And then they told me, and they're making like 50% more than me.
Wow.
And it was like,
Yeah.
what? And they were a bit older than me. And so then like on paper, it was like, oh, this person is worth more. But then when I'm sitting there being like, but we do the same thing like every day. Then I was like, okay, I need to ask for money. Like I read Lean In. I was really into like, okay, I'm a woman. Like I need to be forward about this. Like I didn't negotiate my original offer. Like I'm worth something. I'm doing big things. I'm taking on more responsibility. Like I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. Now I'm supposed to ask. And so then I asked, and they pulled like let's make a growth plan for you and come back to it in a year. And I was like, wait, what? Like I just did like our biggest project, like, and I led it and it was a success. Like what the heck? I was like, okay. And then like brought it up with my manager a little bit subtly, being like, so like I'm kind of aware of like other people making more money, and I think it's something we need to talk about. And they're kind of like maybe.
So how did it
later.
backfire?
Basically, it backfired in that like I never got a raise, and I never even got a title change, even though I was putting in those efforts.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of like backfired in my head, because then I felt like I'm not valued here. Like I don't know. It really messed with like my ability to enjoy the job.
I think I think that would mess with anyone with the job, and I think that's a good thing. Did it help prompt you to make a change?
Well, I guess that's kind of where like the final question is. It's like, because in my head I'm just like, okay, well then you leave, and then that's what you do. But I suppose it's kind of like when everything else is really good.
Right.
It's like, is there any way to do more to like fix that, even for myself? Like, could I have just been like, okay, just accept it for what it is and enjoy it, or leave?
Yeah.
Is there any alternative to that, to get me to accept it when I tried and I couldn't? Or I don't know. Yeah, is there an alternative
I hear
solution?
you. It's like scary, and it sucks to find out you're being paid so little. One of the things that happened with that previous company, that I actually ended up leaving that previous company, even though I got the 55% raise, because knowing that they had undervalued me for so long, and that it was the same situation where the entire team that was hired originally were hired very low, and then they had that 10% raise, and all of us were being paid so little, and everything else was great, but they were like so money obsessed. Even though the company could pay more, they refused to do it for other people without them specifically asking for me. And when I made that realization, I got that raise and I quit 3 months later, because I realized that there are other jobs out there, there's other fish in the sea, and that I could find some place where I am enjoying it just as much as I was before, but I can also be in a place where career-wise and money-wise, I'd be in a much better place. So knowing that your current employment, there is this negative feeling of, okay, they don't value me as much as this other hire. Spin that into a kind of positive thing in terms of being like, maybe there's another place out there that I will be just as happy at. And I didn't quit immediately. I went out and I found other offers, and I talked to other companies, and I saw that prompted me to make that leap into interviewing other companies. Because I think also as women, we can get kind of like stuck in the place that we are. And I think that men find it easier, and again, these are generalities, but in general, men find it easier to switch and switch companies and find other opportunities where women could be like, I'm really happy here, just not being paid enough, but I'm really happy. And it's good to have these forces to say, I can be really happy at another place and also being paid what I'm worth. So I think it's just a mental game to use that negative feeling to prompt a change. And maybe it could be just say, give them a timeline, like I mentioned to the other question. You say, hey, I asked for this. I know that I'm being underpaid. I would like, there's an action plan in place, but at the end of this action plan, at the end of 3 months, I want to see some kind of update in my position and being more direct in what you're saying. Like, I love this job, but I don't love this job enough that I am willing to risk my, my retirement, that kind of thing. So yeah, not really good answer, but hopefully the mental things are hard. Mm-hmm.
Hi. So just to reiterate on what she had asked about wanting a title change and a salary increase. So I'm in a position where I was hired more junior, I suppose, but then I found out that I'm doing the exact same job as the other women are, and they're getting paid 50% more than I am. And but the company is really reluctant to change my title. And I get the impression that that's because then they'll have to compare my pay versus the other women's pay. And I feel like they use the title kind of as like the reward more than having the salary to match it. And so, like the other woman said, then they mentioned, oh, well, we can create a 1-year plan. Where it's like, well, what are some of your interests? We can invest in trying to map out your career and getting you to those goals that you want. And really, all I want is them to change my title and match my salary. Yeah. That's really all I want. So, how do you face the? Do you either push the current title that you have and just want to add, senior to it so that you can negotiate more pay? Because then they said, well, if you move to the next title, then you would be really far ahead of the salary, like the median salary.
So the question is, like, how do you push that?
How do you push to say, well, the title should just be a given because of the tasks at hand, but the salary, why do they use title as a bargaining chip?
So have you said those words to your employer?
Yeah. And how do you say that?
Do you know what they responded with when you say, like, okay, I'm working at this level, and I think I should be paid, should be at this level. Like, you have me as junior. I'm doing everything a senior person should be doing. What do they respond with?
So I have a really good relationship with my boss, and so he wants to push for me to he thinks it's completely unfair, but it's HR that's completely blocking it.
It's nice when they have HR, it's like you have this little buffer. They're like, they can be the good cop where HR is the bad cop. Oh, HR, they're the ones in problem with this. Yeah.
So, but I mean, I've seen the communications between them, and I know that it's HR.
Okay.
So then I don't really know how to go about that.
I think, so I'm going to put, I keep bringing up my husband as an example because he's going to be my bad cop. I think if he was in that situation, he would say, I want to make this change in 6 months. And just give, like, I like that. I mentioned that before the other ones. Actually, I've decided just now that I really like that tactic of being like, here's a date. I love this company, and here is a date that, and they could say an action plan over a year. And I would say don't do a year because that is so long and that's so easy for them to just like lose track of what you're doing. You say, here is the 3 months and 6 months places I want to be. And if I don't make it, I'm going to have to look for other opportunities. And it's worth it saying that up front. To your manager who might be like fighting for you, but there isn't that fear of being like, I am going to lose this employee to better opportunities. Because, that thing I mentioned in the beginning, that you worry about what the company is giving you, but what can the company lose if they lose you? Use that and be like, this is why I'm an valuable employee. This is why I'm so awesome. And I should be paid at this point, and you could lose me if you don't work with me. And it's something where you have to be prepared to follow through in that case. maybe that 6 months go long, and then you find out that they're not on your side and that you can make a change. But it's like being strong enough to be just direct. And it's so hard to be direct like that. I totally understand, but it's something that I think that's something that will help like really solidify those discussions and make them real to the employer. Because HR doesn't want to go through and hire someone else. They're going to lose way more money, trying to hire someone else for your position, because they're probably going to have to pay more, or they're going to have to like spend the time of when you could be working on the product to hire. And so it should be a no-brainer that it's easier to pay you more or give you that new position than to rehire. So just being like really direct, hopefully should help. Do we have more time? Okay.
So, and the IT market is prevailed by men, right, working, and women is minority. I heard many times that I need to behave more like a man.
Right.
It's like to not behave like a man,
It's a
but
stupid
to
stereotype.
display more of the men qualities,
Yeah.
right? To be more assertive, to be
Yeah.
less emotional.
Being direct is a man's quality, in which case, no, it's not. It's being a human.
Yeah, so for example, and actually I have a big pet peeve with the emotion side because I've heard that I need to create a thicker skin and just like, I like to know what people feels. I like to
Yeah.
I don't have issues dealing with emotions.
Right.
Anyway, but that being said, do you think that women tend to self-sabotage on the work environment? Like, is there anything that maybe, even for the fact of believing that manly qualities are more preferable than feminine qualities? So do you have any take on that?
So the question was women self-sabotaging?
Yes, and how would we self-sabotage
How do we
ourselves?
self-sabotage? I mean, for example, like going into my negotiation, thinking to myself, I'm going to ask for 90, and at the very last moment, my brain screamed and I lowered it because 90 felt way too scary. And so at that moment, I lowered my ask because I was scared. And there was no logic around that. It was just fear. That was absolutely self-sabotage. And self-sabotage, I hate the whole men, I hate it if it's like the whole like, oh, men are direct and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, that's a man's quality. And women they have feelings and they don't want to rock the boat. And those are women qualities. Like those comparisons suck. Those generalities suck, but the generalities do kind of exist, and so you show that we do fall in those two categories. And women knowing that doing those things is a form of self-sabotage. When you're too scared to be direct and too scared, when men are, when they're like, hey, I'm going to leave in 3 months if I don't get this, and they probably get it, and women not being able to do that is a form of self-sabotaging. So yes, we do that all the time. I do it all the time. One of the tactics what my husband did to me, and one of the things I do now is knowing that I'm going to self-sabotage. So in the case of asking for money, the reason why my husband said 90 and I said 85, and I went back to him and he's like, I knew you would do that. It's like now moving forward, the mental tactic I do is to raise the amount of money I'm going to ask for, raise the things, knowing that I could get scared and self-sabotage and say little, or knowing that they're going to negotiate or whatnot. So I have to like boost myself even more to knowing that I'm going to self-sabotage. So I guess what I'm going to say is that self-sabotaging exists, definitely. I think in general, women tend to self-sabotage more. And a big tactic to not self-sabotage is to be aware of the places that you could potentially do that. When you're like at home and you're thinking about this process and you're not in that scary situation, think through that process and find the areas you think you're going to self-sabotage, and think about tactics to deal with that. Think about what you're going to do to prevent that reaction happening. And think about ways that even if you do self-sabotage, you'll land higher than you would have asked for otherwise. So asking for an even higher number so that at the last moment that panic sets in, you won't like drop yourself too low. So I think that will help. And I think we're done with time.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you
Okay.
again.
Thank you, everyone.